talk about the practical implementation of the NSP, focus on Pillar 4. Our next speaker is Mr. Sibusiso Malope, who's a social work graduate from the University of Pretoria. His first work experience is social work dated in 2005, and then the Pretoria Children Welfare. He has a good combination of work experience from both the private and public sector, currently serving the DSD National as a Director, VP, and Prevention of GBV. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Program Director, and good afternoon, colleagues. It's difficult to be standing here after lunch, immediately after lunch. I'm going to be quite quick, Program Director. I'm really concerned about your time and worried that we will lose more and more people. So what we're going to do, I'm going to be facilitating with my colleague.
Absolutely. Unati. Absolutely. So, Mr. Unati Ngomla, who will be talking about the integrated justice system. Mr. Unati, let me get you another mic.
But it's fine, Fatima. We'll share here. So it's going to be, I'm going to quickly run through the NSP presentation. I won't take long on it because a lot has been said about the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence. So what is maybe important for one to highlight is the fact that the Department of Social Development is responsible for the implementation of the NSP, which is the particularly Pillar 4. I must qualify it. Pillar 4 on response, care, support, and healing. So a lot already has been said in terms of the NSP in totality from Advocate Matumise. So the practical part we wanted, or rather DSD wanted to bring forth to this session, was more to say what is it that the department has done since the inception of the NSP, and particularly in our leading Pillar 4. It's also important to highlight, similarly to what my colleague who gave the overview of the NSP indicated, that when you're talking about the NSP and its pillars, you cannot just speak about one pillar. There's interrelatedness in the pillars. She already highlighted all the other pillars from the coordinating pillar 1, pillar 2, on prevention and building of social cohesion, 3, which talks to legislation reform, and then 4, which is response, care, support, and healing. And that is where this specific service of shelters emanate from, actually. Not emanate from, but it's linked to that. So we were given this task upon the approval of the NSP that was launched by President already as far back as 2020 March. And we took the task as a department together with civil society. And this goes back to yesterday's discussion to say, can there be an era where it will only be government without civil society? I can repeat this again. I don't foresee that. It's just an impossible thing to think even about. So even in our facilitation or leading of the NSP, we are leading it side by side with civil society and having equal role in this. So the chairperson is a chief director from the Department of Social Development, and she's supported currently by Dr. Omar from the children's sector, Teddy Bear Clinic to be specifically. So they are both chairing the NSP Pillar 4 specifically. So since the inception of the pillar, there's a lot that has happened. Some of this work did not only start with the NSP, it was work that was already in the sector that we were all undertaking. I must say that the arrival of the NSP as well, we must also go back to history to say there was what we call the Program of Action on No Violence Against Women and Children. So the NSP was born from a document that was there. So there was a strategy from government which was the program of action on no violence against women and children. So even if you look at the issues of pillars, it is also a concept that was already on the POA. We used to call it the POA. So I thought maybe I must also highlight that so that when you look at this work, you don't look at this as things that are new. Just to highlight a few of the work, and within the pillar, we also have other departments. We've got subs, we've got Department of Health, we've got Correctional Services, we've got Basic Education, we've got quite a number of other departments that are there. The sectors that are also there is not only VEP, we also have other sectors like I've highlighted the children a team like your Dr. Omar. We've got Childline, Lifeline that is there with us. We've got a number of other stakeholders that are here. So this report also is not a DSD report. It's a pillar report that talks to the work of the sector, which is beyond DSD work. A lot of this work also comes from the CSO, and I want to maybe, while I'm on that as well, just to take this opportunity to say to our colleagues who are participating in the pillar 4 has got over, I think, about 65 participants who are representing organization. One of the challenges of the pillar is that we do not get reports from everyone who's participating in the pillar. And this is one of the challenges, colleagues, because should it be that we are called to account, it's DSD going together with a chairperson who's from civil society. It's a team. It's a pillar work, and if the pillar's report is weak and it doesn't reflect what is happening in the sector, it's not necessarily a picture in terms of a department or a non-government organization. It's a reflection of the country as a whole. So I really want to plead with all of us who are participating on Pillar 4 to say, when you send, although DSD again together with civil society, they are also running the secretariat. I've got May Tumeling from the team, and then we've got Heidi, who's also coming from a CSO from Cape Town, who's also our very awesome chairperson secretariat, who's putting together the reports. And the biggest frustration is the fact that we hardly get any input on the report. And we submit monthly report to president. I think it's something that advocate did not cover. I think me coming from the pillar, I can cover it to say there's an expectation that on a monthly basis we must reflect what sort of work have we done as a pillar. Just to highlight a few things, there has been a number of things that the pillar has achieved. One of them is the fact that within our victim-friendly services as SAPs, we've conducted training of those police officers that are in police stations where there are victim-friendly facilities. But we are still, as a pillar, advocating for establishment of victim-friendly facilities or rooms in all the police stations across the country. And I think one of my colleagues here earlier on spoke about, I think it was a colleague from CGE, to say the issue of our survivors and victims when they report cases in police stations, they need to feel that they are fully supported and that the environment is conducive for them. So that's one of the work of the pillar, to say we need to really achieve that. We've also having these pieces of legislations that I'm highlighting now there. I've spoken to one of them yesterday, but also to highlight, to say where are we with these pieces of legislations and policies. The white paper on families has been approved by cabinet. We've got what we call the core package of services that is already existing. We also have the amended Older Persons Act. You will probably know, colleagues, that there's also a register that emanates from the Older Persons Act, which is to look at um, persons that abuse older persons to be on the register, similarly to what we have for the child protection, as well as the National Register for Sex Offenders. So it's something that we're looking at. You might have seen in the media and wherever, and it's very little that is shown in the media about abuse of older persons. And trust me, for all you know, very soon you'll be an older person yourself. So that is why it's very important that we do look after the interest of older persons. I'm already having some gray hair, so I know that Before I know it, I'll be in that space. So we have a responsibility to not, don't look at it and think it's far somewhere there. Very soon you'll be an older person and you will need these pieces of legislations as well. Then, in terms of shelter services, this is where we are. It's important for me to highlight that we have, as a pillar, also worked on a policy on provision of psychosocial services within shelters, or policy on sheltering services. And it's an achievement in a sense that it already, and I want to believe some of you might have been through the trainings that talks to these policies. It already begins to talk to very sensitive issues, like, for example, the issue of what do we do with 12-year-old children that are already sexually active, and do we discriminate them from being in our shelter facility? What do we do? You know, it's two ways. It's also a risk for the boy child, but it's also a risk for a girl child who's there. What do we do then? And remember, we want to keep families together. So do we say the boy child must go to a child and youth care center or wherever and then be separated from the siblings and the mom? Those are some of the issues that are there. And they are reality for you, I know. You deal with this on a daily basis. Um, in line also with the resolution, as I'm going to close, I'm going to take long on this. The other key thing that I thought it's important here to highlight as well is that we have, as a pillar and a department, funded um, a number of CSOs, especially emerging CSOs, through the Criminal Asset Recovery Account, what we called CARA. Uh, and there's a figure here, you probably will dispute it. There's a huge amount of money that is highlighted here as it as an amount of money that we have, that we know on records that we have actually distributed to CSOs. We're talking about 191,000 from million, 191 million from 2021, 2022, 2022, 2023. Don't say who, because it has not reached me. All I can confirm is that we indeed have some. There was a colleague from Limpopo here who was actually asking me, when is the last call for proposal? And it's something that from DSD side, we try to secure this funding as much as possible, and it doesn't focus on DSD activities, but it focuses on CSO specifically. So I thought I must highlight that we've also established, we have running and established, it's actually 4 Kuseleka one stop centers. In Western Cape, there's one, Sarki Partman. We've got one in Limpopo, there's one in the Eastern Cape, and one in Northwest. And there are about 57 Tutuzela designated GBV facilities across the country that are also part of the services that are reported within this pillar. Colleagues, then I'm going to skip through these slides because of time, but this talks to how, given what is in the on the summit, the latest summit resolutions, what is it that we have done as a pillar up to this far? And I can confirm that there's quite a lot of work that has been done. We've been talking about establishment of shelters, and one of the targets that we have as a pillar was to establish shelters in district without shelters. For example, there is an indication here to say we currently have 44 coverage of shelters in them, and it's actually much more now, much more than 44, because we've just established one in Northwest in August. But there's a target of saying at least we must have one shelter per district. And there were specific districts where we don't have shelters. One of them was Zululand. There's Kenneth Kaunda in Northwest. There's quite a number of them in Limpopo, your Waterberg, Sikukune, and Vembe district don't even have a single shelter. It's something that as a pillar we are working on. And I must say that even from the DSD side, there's even funding that has been secured to actually support civil society organizations that wants to establish shelters. There was an amount of about 41 million that has been secured, about 12 million of that to just give as startup funds to establish these shelters. So it's something that is also work of this pillar. Just as I close, and I want to hand over to my colleague, Mr. Unati Ngumla, to talk to us about the issue of integration. What we've also picked up as a critical thing that we need to look at as a pillar is how are we integrated with all other work that is happening in other pillars, number one, but also all other work that is happening in the country, but more so also government to government. So he's going to just take us through the how the integrated justice system is actually assisting us in terms of integration, some of our work. But more so, I have a wish from the side of DSD, or rather, how can I put it? I wish for a day where we will have, in terms of systems, where we will be able to tell, as we're sitting here by click of a button, where do we have bed capacity for a person who's in need of a shelter across the country. Like you must be able to, you as expert, you must have, whether it's an app on your phone, but you must tell that in the Northern Cape, if I'm looking for space for a woman now with children, where can I get such? If you sit it here and you want space somewhere in Northwest, in KZN, it's something that I wish we can reach that stage. And it's possible, by the way, colleagues. It's not information that we want to be available to all Tom, Dick, and Harry, but it must be available to the expert, which is us. We sit it here now. It calls for you to call from one shelter to the next, looking for bed spaces. And it's not the best way of doing our work. There is surely a better way in which we can do this. So it's one of the things that I'm hoping that Unati can talk to us about. We have limited time. The chairperson will be looking at his watch, the program director. But thank you so much for this opportunity.
Uh, Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm not gonna bore you with the details who I am, where I'm from. Just straight to the point because I'm worried about the time. My name is Unati Ngumla. I'm with the Department of Social Development, working with the Integrated Justice System. So I'll give you a little brief background about this IJS. It was conceptualized in 1996 in the Government of National Unity. The funny part is that now we're back to Government of National Unity again, but basically the program, it wants to modernize the criminal justice system. And I think, colleagues, it's important for us to reflect on this quite a bit because as a country, one of the things that people come in and invest in any of the countries, they always look at safety and security. How are we dealing with the issues of law enforcement in any of the countries? If those things don't tick, people don't come in and invest. Now, the program wanted to make sure that one, all people in South Africa are and feel safe. And I think that's one of the issues that we have now that is coming out very strongly, especially listening to the previous speakers and the efforts that government is making in dealing with such issues. But also the program, it talks to the criminal justice system as a whole, that we need to make sure that if we modernize this, people should know exactly where the bottlenecks are, especially the cabinet, because what it does, it makes them to invest money where the bottlenecks. Now, I'll simply make an example about the issues of rape in the country. The labs at SAPS were discovered to be a reason why we have bottlenecks in the conviction, right? Because you have to wait for like 10 years before they can process this. So criminals understand that, and they can continue their business. And unfortunately, people are losing confidence in government as well. And also, the constitution is very clear. If you are arrested, if NPA is not ready to proceed with the case within 48 hours, then you must be released if they know where you stay. Now, if technology is not utilized in all these processes, it then becomes difficult for us to say these people must be put behind bars, even the, if the case is not trial ready. And we know that there are bottlenecks within SAPS. Like I said, the idea is to make sure that from the time we report the case, we should be able to measure until the person is released back to society, which social development plays a key role there because you support the victim, and in the dialogue before the person is released back to community, social development is involved. And now there's an expectation that all the support that you give the victim of crime, it is a support that will be used when that time of a parole has to be considered. That how is the victim feeling about this thing? And unfortunately, if we do not use technology, that information is not going to be available. Now, this is why when we talk about the technology, and I like the mem here in front of us was showing the analysis of the environment using technology, because those are the barrier, those are the things that we need to be pulling closer as a department. I spoke to Lumka as well about it to say this is the type of information that we need, because if you don't understand, because we will know where those people are coming from, which provinces, in line with the interventions that needs to be made, because you cannot shoot in the dark to say I'm going to go and talk about GBV in areas where people are battling with Nyaupe. So the information that we get is the information that makes us even smarter to respond adequately to issues. So that's what the IJS was conceptualized to do. Now, as I've said, really was just about the review, but what the importance of the review is to say that take this structure, make sure that the excos of the various member departments understand what is expected from them. Like I said, we have quite a number of departments that are involved. SAPS is one of them, NPA is one of them, Department of Justice is one of them, Legal Aid South Africa, Office of the Chief Justice, Social Development, Correctional Services, and Home Affairs. I don't know if you colleagues you saw the video that was played here earlier about the criminal justice system, and I think this is basically what we're trying to implement. Now, how we are structured, this is a criminal justice system when you look at the criminal processes. But if you look at social development just underneath SAPS, you see their bar is quite long, longer than many of the departments that are involved in the criminal justice system. Why? Because we deal with people. Impact of the criminal justice system, as well as the laws of the country, can only be understood based on the feedback that social development gives. Now, when you talk about the shelters, and when you talk about the GBV cases, when you talk about human trafficking, when you talk about all these things, this is social development that is involved. And the involvement, you'll find out that majority of the people that social development is with don't go to SAPS to report a case. They go to social development. Now, in fact, we had a conversation last week with the colleagues to say, maybe what we should also do is to feed SAPS with the information collected from DSD. DSD must be the trigger of the criminal justice process, because the information, as you help the victim of crime, you gather crucial information that needs to be passed on to SAPS for them to start with the court processes. However, the secondary victimization is something that we are very much worried about, because we don't want victims of crime to go through reliving the whole trauma that they went through during that process of whatever abuse that they've gone through. Now, the IJS, we've got key 5 priority areas which are delivered in 3 work packages. The unique identifier, because we need to know the person through multimodal biometrics, right? And we need to be able to identify the person through the biometrics. We're no longer interested in people asking your name, because criminals have got different names. So we want you to check. You can tell us your name, but we use your fingerprints to verify with Home Affairs what's your name. And once we know, or as we know that you do not have an ID, then we can apply for one for you, so that at least now you are in the population register and you are understood. Then there's case management. Case management is basically the integration that we're talking about here, that we need to be able to take information information collected from one member department to the other member department that has to deal with those issues. And I know, colleagues, this is the area where I understand that is the biggest gap because we work in silos. And the more we work in silos, the more criminals are going to escape. The more our work will not even be known. As we were asking questions to, I think the lady that was presenting around the slowness of implementing some of the things that have been agreed, sometimes it's not so much about the slowness, it's about the lack of information. And that information, if it's going to come in an Excel spreadsheet from one province to the next province, how many hands does it pass through? We remove numbers and all these other things. But if it's technology, we link the name with the ID and you know the person that we are dealing with. And we can even tell you the number of services that that person is getting from government. Now, then there's a KPI dashboard, key performance indicator reporting dashboard, because what we do, we want to measure the time a crime is committed. When you call 10111, how long did it take them for them to respond up until the process gets to court and the person is actually reintegrated back to society. That's basically what the 28 KPI is trying to do. Because if we don't have that information, when people are saying that the processes are slow and everything else, it's easy to believe them because you don't have any facts to support what you're saying, even if you said you are effective. So through the use of technology, that's what we want to basically improve. Then we have the central database, which is a transversal. Basically just measures exactly the effectiveness from the time you report, you pass it to SAPS, NPA, all that it measures so that we know that the court said on this date, on this case, and this is the outcome. So that information is flowing through the member departments as we speak. Now, the governance of the IJS is quite important because this is one of the things that we had to change. I think I'm getting gray now. I've been long in this program. I started in this thing in 2014. But one of the things that we identified is that we needed to reorg the structure because previously we had a board that was basically attended by the chief directors at departmental level. And we knew at the time that they could not commit the departments. Now we propose to have a IJS ministerial committee, the IJS board of DGs, as well as the implementation committee. So the people who are sitting in the implementation committee who are basically looking on the day-to-day operations and the projects, the projects that we're implementing, and then we have the DGs that are giving the strategic direction, the interdepartmental program performance and oversight, the critical issues that the program is facing, as well as the accountability, because they are accounting officers. The ministers, they provide the political vision and the strategic alignment with the policy of the country. Because these are the things, colleagues, that will get the president and the executive to understand what is happening in this space. Now, me coming here to present, I said to my colleagues earlier when I got in here, I said, you guys, you treat me like a poor cousin because I need all this information. For us to be effective in what we do, all the partners that are dealing with these issues need to talk to DSD electronically so that we can present these cases. In fact, somebody was talking about substance abuse. The very interesting thing in South Africa, if you look at people who have committed crime, majority of the time they are under substances. They're using substances at the time of committing crime. Now, you have to ask yourself a question. Does this person have a medical condition plus the criminal element? Because the courts in our country, they focus on the criminal side of things, not the medical condition. And now this is a space that Department of Health has to deal with. Because you're going to take people through this process because they are hooked on Nyaupe, they commit crime because they wanted to get the next fix, and you're not dealing with the problem, you're dealing with the symptom. And if we are not bringing that information to the fore, people will always put kids to the criminal justice process and they come back, become hardened criminals over time. And this is the information that I know that this sector has. And the more we share information, the better it is for us to actually look at it to say, oh, okay, this person is a substance user, but he's committed crime. Now we have to inform the courts before they can go through the trial to say, okay, let's deal with the substance issue as well. Because if the court determines that this person must go through that program and will also see the impact, because we want them to be citizens of the country that are productive. I think this is just, yeah, it was just the benefits of the oversight, which I think I've tabled. So these are the departments that we're basically sharing information with as we speak. There's a Office of the Chief Justice, Social Development, SASSA, Home Affairs, SIRA. SIRA is a private security industry, yeah. Correctional Services, Legal Aid, South Africa, Road Traffic Management, SAPS, National Prosecuting Authority, and DOJ. Colleagues, the importance of this sharing of information is going to assist us in many respects. I mean, I listen to colleagues talk about human trafficking, and I think for me, it's one of those things that as you sit here, you don't understand that the criminals that you're dealing with in the human trafficking are the very people that are robbing the banks, are the very people that are doing all the different things. So what we have done, we've basically created a PIVA that verifies information with Home Affairs. When we were running the pilot in Cape Town, there was a guy who was arrested for a traffic violation, only to find out that that person was involved in different matters in the different country, in the different provinces of the country. So what we're saying is that criminals, they understand this ecosystem and they are always ahead, because once police focus on this area, they move on to that area. Once police focus on this area, they move on that area. And these are the very people that are terrorizing all the communities in the country. So these are the things that we're just saying that now, with the integrations that we have, we're directly communicating with Home Affairs, we're getting information from member departments, and if this sector can also contribute. I think Mr. Malube spoke about the bed space allocation. Those things are very important for us because, I mean, like I said, technology, we can do anything, but we just need to understand exactly what it is that we need to do in order to address some of the problems. This is basically integrated person management. So, okay, yeah. So basically, we've implemented this solution with SAPS. I think we've got 20 police stations now that are running this. The idea behind is that when you are arrested, we need to make sure that we know who you are. We have all the different biometrics that we have: your eyes, your face, your body marks, everything, so that by the time you there is crime that is committed in another area, we can do latent search with Home Affairs and we'll be able to know that these are the people that have committed this type of crime. So this thing is there, it's working in the police stations, which is exactly what the video that we've played earlier. And also this person, yeah, it's basically explaining that basically the biometrics, the iris that we have, and yeah, because one of the things that when you're dealing with a criminal, even the people that go in and visit them in police in at DCS is exactly the same criminals that you should be looking for. So if you were to say when people are coming in to visit special people, then they must put their own biometric fingerprints for them to get in. You'll find out that they are wanted elsewhere. So this is how we're trying to be effective in dealing with the different approaches to make sure that we remove these people from I see you looking at your hand, and we have been instrumental in actually helping Home Affairs to upgrade their harness. Even the people now that are visiting with the passports and everything, asylum seekers, we will have their fingerprints, because one of the important things is that we should be able, if crime is committed, to know who has committed crime. So that's basically what we're doing, and yeah, the harness is doing well. Legally, I mean, if social workers don't want to use the system, even the even the magistrate, the court judges now are using Supreme Court of Appeal. They're using Court Online, so the technology is there. Everybody's using it, and NPA as well in terms of the assistance when people have committed crime in different countries. Legal Aid South Africa for what to call this, the legal aid assistance. Colleagues, this is another project that we are doing, that we have done, the Femicide Watch. One of the things that I think is important also to talk about, especially when you're talking about the reporting of issues, because what we found is that the people are failed by the state. You go in and report a case with SAPS, they don't listen to your matter. 6 months down the line, the person is dead. And there is no accountability. We just see the people on the femicide, and yet when you go back, so these are the things that we should be able to say. How many of the women were abused, reported the matter to social development, reported the matter to police, the case went to the criminal justice process, but the person ended up in the femicide watch. These are the things that we want to expose and make sure that we eliminate, because this is abnormal. We are not a normal society. Okay, and then, okay, this is where, Mr. Malupe, I think you are interested. So this is currently, this is what is happening. All the children that are in conflict with the law, SAPS, once they arrest a child, we get a notification through the IGS hub. A message will go to DSD endpoint. Endpoint basically is where we say this message came into national office. It belongs to a police station that is sitting in the Eastern Cape. That message is sent to Eastern Cape. The probation officer in the Eastern Cape receives the message to say there's this child. As I said, the child and the case details goes into intake. They register the case. It goes to probation management for basically for the assessment. But once it goes there, it goes and check this bed space in the different facilities around. And then once they find the space, you request the space electronically, and then the space is reserved. So what I was saying to Mr. Malupi is that this thing is available. We are going to simply take his requirements, change this thing, configure it, because one of the things that we're trying to do is to save money and time. Configure this to meet his requirements. Once it meets his requirements, off we go. But this is the other important, next slide, because I'm showing time here. But this is the type of information that we're collecting. Now, it's important, colleagues, that you reflect on these things, because like I said, you're dealing with different cases, and those cases are important to the criminal justice system. We can get any information. This thing can be rejigged and actually deliver exactly what you want. But what is important is that you need to use technology. If you want to fight GBV in this country, if you want to fight many of the issues, you need to use technology. Because what it does, the case does not disappear. You see, I used to work with SAPS. I would go to police and says, okay, I'm looking on a Monday morning. I receive 150 messages for the 150 dockets that needs to come to us to sit with NPA and look at the cases for the day. We'll receive about 70. The messages are 150. The actual files will be about 70, not more than 70. So I would ask them, guys, where is the rest of the dockets? Then you go to the station commander, and on the system is booked to court. The investigating officers, those dockets are sitting in the boot of their cars because they are not processing the information through the system. Because SEBS was saying, oh, you've sent dockets to court, it means you're working. So they're getting performance bonuses for those things. But through technology, and those dockets, by the way, they were disappearing. People were selling those dockets. And you see, the sad part about the criminal justice system is that if the information is not there, that case, for you to find witnesses that were captured in the docket, and the docket disappears, you will never find those witnesses again. And that's why we thought that using technology is important. And the more the sector adopts technology, the better it is for us to deal with crime in this country. On that note, colleagues, it was real. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, in the interest of time, I will call Mr. Malope and Advocate Bernardine for wrap up and resolutions.
Good afternoon again, colleagues. We're going to take you through the wrapping of the session. We've actually come to this point, and it's me and the very beautiful lady on my left, an advocate for that matter. We're just going to quickly run through the context of what has been covered, and I must also say special thanks to the team. There's a team that's there at the corner, Tamara and her beautiful daughter. Thank you so much for quickly doing this for us. Yesterday we were discussing it and say we must take notes, 1 point each in every presentation. So this is really come as very handy. So the session looked at quite. It was at another level this year, colleagues. I must say that this has really developed into something really big. And I want to say to Dr. Tango, the beautiful idea of hosting the World Shelter Conference in South Africa. I think we are moving to those grounds. I can even see with the level of content that is coming through and empirical data as well. So this really it's exciting. And it's also going to be more exciting to say we were part of it when it started. So the conference at the Indaba looked at quite a lot of complex issues that we debated in this session. But I think in the main, there's also an understanding that there's so much work together. There's still that hope in the midst of all the complexity of the issues that we are dealing with. There's connecting with each other in terms of all stakeholders on equal basis. There's collaboration and partnership that we are realizing that we can't do without. There's also been serious frankness in discussion and conversations, which I think it's been key because we have been frank. And I think when we opened, myself and Dr. Tango yesterday, we did say that, let's be open to criticism. And there's also connecting what we know with what we do, which was highlighted by research yesterday to all of us in terms of so that we are able to shift in terms of policies and programming, understanding who, where, how, what, and in terms of developing interventions that required us to move. But we are moving a bit by bit. The way in which media also perpetuate issues of stranger narrative when it comes to GPV, it was highlighted. Rebuilding trust, address the the deficits and working collaboratively in the face of significant challenges. So we also acknowledge that there are genuine challenges that are faced by all of us. And with this, I'm saying both civil society, government, and probably also private sector face the same challenges to say if they were to be involved, how and why and how exactly. Because I can say this with all confidence because I know now and then we interact with the alcohol industry. They really want to come to the space. We have our own, directives in how they can come into the space. And they also have profits that they need to protect. There's so much that we are battling with, and it's a reality. So I don't want to say, I'm just trying to highlight the picture of the challenges that are there. We've also covered issues of legislations. There was a legislation that was covered yesterday in the National Council for Gender-Based Violence legislation, and it was covered in quite detail, even the disparities that were picked up there in terms of the misalignment of the NSP and the gaps that are there with the legislation. They were critique. And I think the spirit of the presenter was that, we're not going to go as a sector into a fighting mode with our stakeholder, which is the Department of Women, but we rather take an approach of saying, let's work together to try and close those gaps. So there were in that legislation specifically, there's issues of accountability across different stakeholders that cannot be linked with the mandate of just one department. That's what we picked up. Constitution of the board of that structure with civil society presence, which is critical. The role of local and provincial structures, and even the establishment of the GPV fund and appointment of secretariat and the process of appointing the council. I am glad I don't have to be in the council because I think the competition is going to be very high. And it's a space that we need to really look at how, because there's so many capable persons in this country to actually be there. And I'm also saying this with so much understanding in terms of the tedious process that the department goes through when they have to appoint the CDA board, which is the Central Drug Authority board at national level. So I want to just maybe say, as a sector, let's really watch out on that, because in that case you have also other emerging political persons that will come and be wanting to be there. You have other disgruntled members from the sector that might want to be there. So you have to be really careful, and maybe let's draw lessons. Let's draw lessons from other boards that are there. And one of them, it's the CDA. I'm saying that because I know I know the dynamics there. We also spoke about the Victim Support Services Bill. Covered it in detail is before cabinet, and it is looking at prevention of secondary victimization. Um, um, then there was a good presentation on facilitating the process of maintenance for survivors of GPV. We looked at the issues there in terms of the challenges that there on the mechanisms that have been put in place to address the accessibility issue. For example, the issues of weekends, whether such services are available. There was even or specific cases that were raised by the colleagues there. In that as well, there was a highlight of the 100-day challenge, which also shows a good model that we can actually adopt as a country to try and deal with issues of backlog and so forth, and the efficiencies in our system. Issues of patriarchy and oh, misogynist, misogynist attitude with the criminal justice system. It's a reality, and I think the colleagues have covered it with examples. Even this morning, Advocate Matumisa also covered it with its serious transformation that we need to look at. And it actually does call colleagues for all of us to advocate for training of persons that are in those facilities. And I don't see us talking about it actually. Your magistrates that are there, who is training them? Who is changing their behavior? Apart from the law that they've learned, but there's other things that are underlying that goes beyond the legalistic. So I think we need to really look at that because it's a serious challenge. Then there was a interesting presentation also that came. There's one that I didn't cover, which on the issue of colonialism is still coming. Yeah. Trafficking in persons. There was a presentation that was covered in terms of trafficking in persons. We learn about the impact of trauma on the brain. I think it was covered in a very interesting manner. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know. We assume that every victim is at the same level sometimes. And we learned yesterday how much victims of human trafficking, you know, it also educated us in terms of issues of the trauma bonding on survivor and how this locked them into a cycle of violence. We will just say, no, you're taking the cell phone. It's as easy as that. No, we don't allow cell phones, but there are deeper other issues that are in the brain in terms of the survivor and how do we get them out of that. And I think it's something that I want to challenge all of us, all these presentations, colleagues. I know we are busy. Take time, go back so that we go back and learn from these presentations. Exploring of what decoloniality lens can offer. This was also very much very interesting presentation as well that we received yesterday. That took us back to say, watch, things don't just start where you are. There is so much that has happened, and even yourself, unfortunately, you don't behave the way you behave because of what is happening now. There is so much that has happened before that you need to look at. And then the highlight also of this was strengthening approaches to sheltering through looking at locating a survivor-centered approach within a wider atmosphere of systematic systems violence, and here we covered issues of the presenter covered issues of repatriation, love, wider frameworks of understanding justice, and drawing a network of women as key resources that we can draw on towards restoring human dignity, healing in our role in shelters. So this means we really need to look at there's much more that is around us, and sometimes we're only looking at where we are, but there's much more that we need to look at. Issues of restitution, Ubuntu, we talk about it all the time, but how do we integrate it in our work and in our delivery of services? And I think it's something that we also lost with the history that was covered yesterday of who we are. And I think and this is not just talking about only it's actually very deep because it also talk about the continent of Africa vis-a-vis other continents that are there. Now, not looking at just race, but looking at just being in Africa. For me, that's how I took it actually. Shelter panel, which was also interesting. The team that sat here, this is the last slide for me. So here we covered the models, three provinces that were brought in front, and I must say to NSM, really very good work that is delivered by the NSM, the National Shelter Movement, South Africa. Can we maybe at this point give them a round of applause? And I know that you did not coach them, Dr. Tango, but they were. It was not. What term did I use yesterday for the? It was not sensational. If that is the term, it was real work that that is taking place, and that's really commendable. I want to really say thank you for that, for those case studies that you brought before us. Strengthening governance and management capacity, achieved compliance, and the model that what we were hoping to be shared with us yesterday, whereby RDP houses are built by the Department of Public Works and some of them benefit victims. We're hoping that we can take this discussion further next year and even getting to know how can we get that also to be spread across other provinces. Continued improvement, drawing on from stories of clients, recreating safety at every level. Strengthening HR policies and capacity. It was shared on the case studies here. I remember very well one of the colleagues, she highlighted how she was so well capacitated by the NSM, even on issues that she never saw herself being able to address. And lastly, linking with strategic planning capacity and support to implement. So this is in the main, it's what came out from the panelists that were seated here yesterday. I'm going to hand over to Advocate Baha to take us further on the other areas that I haven't covered. And I'm summarizing. The notes are quite detailed that the team had put together. Thank you, Advocate.
Thank you, Sabu, and we'll get all these notes to everybody. Yeah, okay, so where you left off, the next presentation was by Sean Samuels from SGS Consulting, and he spoke about building resilient futures. He spoke to us about recognizing the shifts in the global funding landscape, which are shaped by the wider political context and the need to explore a range of funding strategies and approaches. He spoke to us about reframing the narrative to demonstrate their holistic role that shelters play, i.e. moving away from we are a support service to we actually do preventative work as well, and actually playing into that shift in the narrative that is needed. Thereafter we had the presentation from HWCETA that spoke about the context of the challenge of GBV in South Africa and using a united front to build a safer societal context, and that is key. They also spoke about awareness intervention to provide education to communities, covering information on GBVF towards inspiring changes in attitudes and behaviors, and the need to work collaboratively collaboratively, I can't get that right. Do anyone try it? With DSD on this. And then lastly, it was covered funding that was available through responding to expressions of interest. Then we had an incredible presentation that really highlighted some of the challenges that we're facing as a society from the Office of the Public Protector, and it dealt with the report on the investigation into administrative deficiencies relating to the GBV related matters in the SA criminal justice system. It's a mouthful. The presentation dealt with the fact that the report provides clear direction on actions that need to be taken to address the inadequate measures currently in place spanning things like infrastructure, human resourcing, and related issues. It was emphasized again and again that the report has been accepted in its entirety with a commitment to parliamentary oversight, and that funding has been set aside through CARA and the EU to DSD to support the work. Then we had a presentation on the NSP on GBVF, and the issues that were raised there was the importance of leveraging the NSP on GBVF as a collectively owned national roadmap by creating greater awareness of it and using it as a strategic instrument to strengthen coordinated action and meaningful impact. And I think we don't do this often enough. And then also the need to work in the sheltering sector with links to all pillars in the NSP, which are all interconnected. And we heard last up about the connection between economic empowerment and the other pillars, and this is something that we need to be able to draw, as shelters, we need to draw on it. And we've got to find ways to break through silos, strengthen state and societal accountability, and make it a living and understood framework. Next up, we had digital facilitated gender-based violence using the online space, and I think this was an incredible presentation speaking about the power of reach and streams of influence and the use of social media to strategically open conversations and engagement and to build capacity in the shelter movement and to amplify positive messaging. Next up, we had the Commission for Gender Equality. I think the presentation highlighted the uneven progress to the CGE's resolutions across the respective provinces, and concerns were raised by those in the room about the lack of follow-through and substantive engagement with relevant parties. Now I'm going to move on to the resolutions. So we did ask everybody if you had resolutions to please hand them in. The board of the NSM also met last night to craft and to discuss resolutions. So the resolutions are the following. The board of the National Sales Movement of South Africa will fundraise for a 3-day indaba next year, which is to be held in Cape Town. Yay, Cape Town. And I know you're all exhausted, and we do this every single year. We walk out of here feeling like we've been hit by a bus, or at least I do. So next year, on the 3rd day, what we're going to do is have a workshop day where we'll work through resolutions, and we'll use the opportunity to engage more in depth on the issues that have been raised during the 2 prior days. So that's resolution number 1. Resolution number 2 is the NSM will scale up its support to call to action, including engaging with the Department of Youth, Women and Persons with Disabilities for the progressive realization of the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Act. I think this is really important that we get in and make sure that people are held accountable to legislative frameworks. And this is going to include engagements around accountability and reporting, processes for civil society nominations and appointments, and the urgent establishment of the fund to resource the work of women's organizations, which is rooted in transparency, equity, and a developmental approach. Resolution number 3 is that the Action Learning Model Handbook that Zubeida has worked so hard on will be published to document best practices and shared amongst all of the NSM members. The handbook will be used to engage funders and mobilize additional resources to expand in-person supports to the action learning models to additional shelters. Resolution number 4 is that the NSM will continue to scale up its public education and advocacy work, including media engagement, its monthly webinars, and the GBV helpline. And with that comes the need to actually start capacitating ourselves when it comes to digital engagements. Resolution number 5, the NSM will engage with National DSD to get financial support for organizations, especially shelters that experience challenges, risk non-compliance, and possible loss of funding and deregistration. And we've had the commitment from the National Department of Social Development that is something they'll be prioritizing. Right, so resolution number 6. The NSMSA will work in partnership with the Ford Foundation and its team to explore ways in which a decoloniality lens can be applied practically to further enriching the existing sheltering model. I really think that there's a huge scope for us to take that lens and make sure that our work speaks to the African continent, and we move away from Western ideas of how we're responding to gender-based violence and femicide. Resolution number 7 is the MSA will develop a strategic action plan to create awareness of financial abuse and consider financial literacy interventions and potentially create a digital wallet. We didn't get an opportunity today to do the presentation on economic empowerment, but economic empowerment is inextricably linked with gender equality, and we cannot do one without the other. So a very important resolution where we are taking real steps to empower women to get out into the job market and to earn. Resolution number 5. In light of the compliance issues highlighted by the Gauteng CBOs, the National Department of Social Development will liaise with NSMSA and shelters in Gauteng to effect resolutions. And then we will engage with the CGE on the report and progress on sheltering. That need was very clear in the room earlier today. And then finally, NSM and National DSD will create an implementation plan to monitor all these interventions and resolutions that we have come up with, and to make sure that we're making progress and put timelines in place for achievement, so that we are held accountable for the resolutions that we come up with today. We can come back next year in Cape Town and say we've achieved this we haven't been able to achieve, and this is what we're going to be doing going forward, so that everything is measurable and we ourselves are making sure that we're giving the requisite amount of attention to our resolutions. And that, madam, is the end of us.
Thank you. And I need to apologize. I slipped up and I never read your profile. I'm going to do that quickly. Advocate. I have to. Advocate Bernadine Bacher, who we've all just heard, is an advocate of the High Court of South Africa. She's been involved in protecting women and children's rights throughout her career as an advocate both in private practice and a family advocate. She serves as a senior family advocate for the Cape Peninsula for many years, and as she's mentioned, she's a director of the SBCWC from January 2018, and she serves on the executive committee of the National Shelter Movement, and is a chairperson of the Western Cape Women's Shelter Movement. Thank you, Advocate. I'd like to now go to our final point, our vote of thanks in closing. And for that, I'll introduce, we've got Ms. Hochi Tumeleng, who's a qualified social worker who's obtained a Bachelor of Social Sciences in Social Work degree in 1988 from the University of Northwest, a certificate in Advanced Management Development from Tshwane University of Technology, a diploma in Health and Social Welfare from the University of the Free State, as well as a certificate course in Advanced and Development Management from the Policy Research Unit under the auspices of the University of Cape Town. She's worked as a social worker since 1988, and she joined the Department of Social Development in 1993. She has progressed steadily within the department, occupying different levels of employment. She's working as a social work policy manager at the National Department of Social Development in the Victim Empowerment and Prevention of Gender-Based Violence Directorate, responsible for policy development, ensuring implementation of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, funding and monitoring of national NPOs rendering gender-based violence services. We then also have Anissa Musa is a qualified social worker who's worked in the NGO space for just over 25 years. Her work experience is centered around family preservation, individual and community development, training and management. She's joined the NSM-SA in April this year as our national coordinator. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I must say it's been a powerful and profound 2 days, and I just want to reinforce what Fatima said this morning, is that clearly there's a lot that's being done. Yes, we have our challenges, we have our gaps, but I think the amount of work that's being done is so vast, and again, it's reflected in the resolutions put forward just now. So, as the national coordinator of the National Shelter Movement of South Africa, I'm privileged and honored to address our respected audience this afternoon to deliver the vote of thanks before we close our fourth national annual shelter indaba. We'll start with our partners and funders, the Heinrich Böll Foundation, the National Department of Social Development team, with special acknowledgement to Mr. Malope and Ms. Itumeleng, with whom I share this space, for the ongoing input in the planning process of this indaba, as well as the ongoing support throughout our financial years, and the work that we do. Mr. Maluleke for organizing the promotional material and gifts. Mr. Vishal Hariprasad and his security team for ensuring all the compliance requirements are met. Ms. Lumpka Olifant and the entire comms team for attending to all the communication and the IT needs of the event. Ms. Claudia Lopez from the Heinrich Böll Foundation for the ongoing support. A special thank you to our hosts, the NSM-SA, its board, executive, reps, secretariat, staff, affiliate shelters, volunteers, as led by our esteemed Dr. Zubeida Dengo and Ms. Melanie Padiachi, for being the drivers in ensuring all the details for the success of what has become a highlight and a significant event on our annual calendar. Ms. Natasha Adonis and the Bushfire Strategic Communications team for managing and coordinating our media outputs and PR. Ms. Tamara Brahm for our report writing and very eloquently capturing this event for future reference. Ms. Elaine Brass from HWCTA, and each one of our speakers over the 2 days, very experienced and informative presentations, and for sharing all their expertise with us. To all our in-person and virtual guests who took the time to join us, some of whom we had to travel far and wide. To our first-time guests, we trust that this will not be your last and that you will continue to join us for future indabas. A special acknowledgement to all our supporters, partners and stakeholders in the GBVF sector who could not attend but will continue to make valuable contributions alongside us in the fight against gender-based violence. We look forward to strengthening our alliances as we leave the space only to make sure that we continue from here with renewed commitment and motivation. On that note, I wish you all safe travels on your journey back home, and we wish you well going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Anissa. Colleagues, we've come to the end of our 2 days in Durban. All of us who were seated here today and yesterday represent a strong, unified voice on the issue of violence against women and children on the national stage. You'll agree with me, colleagues, that it is through collaboration, knowledge exchange, and adoption of innovative practices that we advance the coordination and implementation of high quality services for women and children accessing our facilities such as shelters, Khuseleka and Khuseleka one-stop centers, etc. I would like to thank all of you who made time to participate in this invaluable innovation. Special thanks to the planning committee and our comms team. Comms, you guys rock. Yes, for your invaluable expertise, input, time, and direction at all stages. Colleagues, now is the time that we take a stand to close gaps, to remove obstacles, to invest in women and children. Our work is important to the whole world. Together we are sending a clear message today that everyone has the right to a life without violence. All victims of gender-based violence deserve a fresh start in a safe space or place. May our joint efforts be stronger than the fear and isolation of the victims. And may we give them hope. Our favorite day for the 2 days that we've been here, that we may give them hope for a better future. I thank you.